Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, English language teachers worldwide. Thanks for joining me, Jason R. Levine, also known as Fluency MC, for an American TESOL Institute webinar. This one entitled The Trident of Fluency. If you're here live, thank you for coming live. If you're watching the recording, thank you for watching the recording. I did a presentation recently with ATI, 10 tips to help students become fluent in English. And we counted them down, and the number one tip was this one: get them hooked, them meaning students, on meaningful practice. Hooked on meaning almost addicted, like craving this. So not, I have to do this English practice for homework, not my teacher thinks I should do this, my parents think I should do this, not even I think I should do this to learn English. More, I just want to do this activity because it's fun. And learning English may be a result of that, but that's not my motivation for doing it. That's what I mean by hooked on practice. Now, what does practice mean? We're going to get into that in a moment. And I hope to show you why I believe very strongly that the idea of practice, if it's meaningful, so something that the student connects with directly to his needs or her needs and interest, how that is absolutely vital. I want to really look at this notion of the trident of fluency. If you hadn't already figured it out, it is relax, repeat, remember. Do I mean that all English language teaching and learning can be boiled down to this idea? Absolutely not. But I hope to convince you that when we're talking about how we reach fluency in a language, that this formula, well, I believe very, very strongly in it. So I'm going to make a case for it in this presentation. What I want to focus on here is what happens in the English language classroom as far as the objectives you have, whether they're yours, your students, the programs, whomever. It's about what you're doing with the language as you move up the hierarchy in the cognitive objectives. Now, whether you know Bloom's taxonomy or not, or subscribe to it or not, I think it's useful for what I'm going to get into. I would hope all of us want students to use English not just as something that they know inside, but that they can apply, that they can even analyze and evaluate and create and do all these wonderful things with. And you may have demands in your school from the curriculum, from parents, from possibly companies, what they want your students to achieve and be able to do with English. How do we get there? Can we get there by just pushing students to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create? I don't think so. I think there needs to be a foundation, and Bloom's taxonomy is very useful to consider that foundation. If we look at it this way, that using English is, well, it's applying what you know. So the grammar structures, the collocations, the pronunciation features, if you've got those, then you can go out, right, and use them. But if you don't have them, or you have them only in the sense that you studied them, maybe you can explain them, answer questions on a test, but you don't really have them here to go out and communicate, well, then you're not going to get very far up the hierarchy here, right? What's missing, I believe, for most language learners is practicing the language. And if you look closely at the foundation here that Bloom had with remembering, recalled facts and basic concepts. Okay, what's the capital of Peru? That's not what I'm talking about here. What we're talking about, if you look closely, is repeat. That it's repetition when it comes to language learning that is the key to be able to move up. So let's look at relax, repeat, remember. We just saw repeat and remember together, didn't we? Let's go back. Ah, yes. But what about relax? You may recall when I said that it's about meaningful practice. That connects to this idea of relaxing. I think that's one part of it, that when it's something that connects to your needs and interests, you pay more attention, you're more invested, and you tend to relax. Now, the other side is what's happening around you, the teacher, the class, the activity, that's going to be important too. Take a look, my ninth grade European history class. Does this look like a good situation to you? It's a true story about my ninth grade European history class. What do you think of this scenario? The teacher told wonderful stories about European history. I loved being in that class. So, yes, it was a good situation, but there's one little problem I need to mention. If you ask me about the things that I studied in that class with Ms. Fahey, I remember her name, wonderful teacher, I don't remember anything. Now, why don't I remember? If it was interesting and meaningful, it was meaningful. Why did this happen? I think it was because I was so stressed. I was so worried about doing well. I wanted to impress this teacher. This is the paradox here. Because I liked her, I wanted to impress her. So I studied, put all the information I could into my head to do well. But my motivation wasn't enough just to enjoy it. There was too much stress around it. So if relax is the first part, and how relaxing can be partly if you're interested and connected, some good language in the chat here, if it's personalized enough, things like this, that's part of having practice be meaningful. And the concept of repetition, huge with practice. When you practice an instrument, when you practice a sport, and I don't mean practice, in some languages, practice means to do, to play, to work. I don't mean that. I mean this. It's the repetition when you're learning violin. It's the repetition when you're learning tennis that is missing so much from language learning for most of us. Most of us, back to Bloom's taxonomy, are trying to move up and apply when we aren't getting the repetition that we need to remember it. You would never tell someone learning piano that they shouldn't repeat scales. However, many times teachers, books, right, syllabi, curricula do not include enough repetition for students to really get grammar structures and vocabulary structures here. Or it's done in a very boring way that isn't meaningful. Take a look at these pictures. Why do you think I have these pictures here? Just after the slide that says repeat. And I hope you can start thinking about how these three things relate. Relax and repeat when you look at these pictures. The reason I included these pictures is very specific, in fact. It's because I decided to go back to the year that I took the European history class and look at the commercials that were on television during that time. And you know what? I don't remember anything from the European history class, which I loved and worked so hard in, but I remember every single word of every single commercial you see here. These are from television commercials that had songs, that had music in them. Why do I remember, without any practice since then of these songs, why do I remember them so easily? What was different? What was I doing differently when I saw these commercials that same year as I took the European history class? Well, when I was taking the history class, I was stressed. Not in the classroom so much, but studying for it, right? All of the things I explained, all the stress around getting a good grade, right? Just memorizing. consciously memorizing. So in the chat, I see constant repetition. Exactly. Commercials. What do? They come on again and again. You see them. There's the repetition. Somebody else wrote here, you didn't have homework for the commercials. Exactly. I wasn't stressed. The commercials indeed were a break from that stress. So I was watching TV like this, totally relaxed. There's the relaxation part. Then there's the repetition, driving those messages from the company into your head. But you're doing it, you're in it, in that environment in a relaxed state. You're not thinking, I need to learn this and remember this. And paradoxically, that's what happens. And there's one more element we're going to get to. Maybe you can guess and put it in the chat. There's the relaxation, there's the repetition, and there's something else. So when we have this formula, you're relaxed and you get repetition. If we say the relaxing part is fun, I see in the comments. I don't think I mentioned that word. If relaxing means, of course, low stress, not consciously trying to memorize, and it's something that means something to you, whether you think it's fun, funny, or it's directly connected to your needs and interests, you're more likely to remember it. Just short term, usually short term and long term, like those commercials. I have them in my long term memory. So the more relaxing it is, if we say relaxing includes the idea of something that's fun, for pleasure, you're not trying to learn, what I call often learning when you're not looking. If that's what's going on with repetition involved, you are more likely to remember things, both short-term and long-term. But here's the thing. I think we all can agree that we don't like to repeat everything. We don't. We want to repeat things that are, as we mentioned, fun or funny, enjoyable, connect to our interest. But even if it's fun, even if you enjoy it and it connects to your needs and interests, do we always want to repeat it? For example, if you have a magazine article that was really interesting for all the reasons we mentioned, are you likely to read that magazine article 4 times? A book that you like. Okay, there are some books we read more than once, but are you likely to read the book several times? Maybe in the course of your life, but are you likely to get repetition with that book in the very near future, right, after reading it? Are you likely to get repetition with that book, right away? So what do we naturally like to repeat? And maybe I should add here, what do we naturally like to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, right? Any ideas? Is there a trident of meaningful and motivating practice activities? Someone in the chat said songs. Let's see. Now, if you know me, Fluency MC, you know I focus mainly on songs, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. But I don't just use songs. There are 2 other things I use a lot in my teaching, in my teacher training, in my teaching. Songs is one of them. Can you think of anything else that we naturally repeat? Motivating, meaningful, and we like to do it again and again and again and again. Well, I think we've got songs, games, and short scenes. So by games, I mean in the classroom or outside the classroom, same with songs, although outside the classroom is maybe the best if you really want to help students get hooked on practicing. And short scenes could be drama scenes, again, in class or out of class, scenes from TV series, movies, right? Even things like jokes, you could say, is kind of a short scene. So I want to talk about these 3 because I believe if relax, repeat, remember is a trident that I believe in. I also believe very strongly in this trident of activities that we like to repeat because we are so hooked We just love the song. We want to hear it again. We want to understand it more, or we want to experience it more. Game, so much fun, or you're competing. So again, you want to play again. And the short scenes, maybe you didn't understand everything, but it's so funny and it's so short, you want to watch it again. And of course, all the activities we can do as teachers with students to encourage the repetition, encourage going back to hear the song again, to play the game again, and the short scene. But the best is when we don't have to encourage them, because it's just already, they're so intrinsically motivated to do it. And I think that we see that happen so often with songs, games, and short scenes. So I want to talk about these three. I'm going to spend much more of my time on the first one. So it's not that I feel we should neglect games and short scenes. It's just because I do so much with songs, and because I want to, in this presentation, talk a bit about how you can use songs to get students to practice material from your syllabus, your curriculum, because that's really the idea here that I want to get into starting now that we've sort of passed the introduction. How can you use songs, games, and short scenes to get those grammar structures, vocabulary words, those collocations, those pronunciation features? How, through repetitive practice that's meaningful, can those students, your students, get that here? So they're ready to use what they've learned more automatically in communicative activities. So with songs, rhyme and rhythm, the way that rhyme and rhythm helps us remember things, the chunking that goes on, just like chunking with vocabulary words, you know, a verb-noun collocation that goes together, a rhyme with a rhyme, a word that rhymes with another word that rhymes. All of this helps to remember. And with rhythm, it's the same. It's all about the patterns. That's what helps our brains encode language, and that phenomenon of, oh, it's just stuck in my head. We don't know, actually, believe it or not, even today, exactly how that encoding happens. It has to do with the patterns, with that idea of, with rhythm, kinesthetically, we remember things better. The fact that we have rhythm, you know, in our bodies, in our lives, everywhere. So that's what we recognize and remember better. And rhyme, one thing I put here, sound spelling relationships. If you read lyrics and you listen to music, you don't need to understand the phonetics of a language, especially English, where it can get really crazy phonetically. It stays in your mind more as a result of rhythm and rhyme. And what about rap music? If you know me, you know I have to focus a bit on this. Is there really something special, or are there more than one special thing about rap music? Absolutely. Absolutely. So if rhyme and rhythm, as we are saying, help us encode language in memory, then what about rap, where rhyme and rhythm are so important, more so than songs that rely more on melodies? So this goes also together with the next point here. So because rap is so focused on the rhythm of conversation and does not rely so much on melody, there's more you can do with rap to help students understand authentic stress in conversation than with more melodic pop songs. You can do more as a teacher with rap and with students with rap if they're a little shy about singing. It's also easier to make rap songs. You know, you don't need, you could just have a basic rhythm. You can do it so it's more like spoken word or poetry. This can be a really big difference. And of course, rap is international. It's universal. Everyone knows rap. Now, back to what I was saying a few moments ago about how to create content in activities that you can use to help students get the language they need up in their heads, relaxing and repeating. So I want to give you a few suggestions and then give you an example. It's not as hard as you think. In fact, I would say it is easier to make a rap uh, for your students, either with your students or just on your own, than it is to make many types of materials. You might not believe me, but I'm going to show you. How do you begin? You don't try to write a song. And maybe that's the problem for many people. No, you start by looking in the textbook or whatever materials you're using and writing down what you think your students need to remember, right? Collecting this language, not thinking about the song yet, right? Thinking about what it is that they need, either because the syllabus dictates it, because you know they need it, because they want it, whatever the factors are that that you need to consider for building their language proficiency. Then one thing you can do is go to a rhyming dictionary like RhymeZone. Very, very important, because that's what almost every songwriter does, whether you know that or not, or they admit it or not. So using a rhyming dictionary to help you write lyrics. Once you're there, you can think about words that are easy to find rhymes for. Maybe you know in your head, or maybe you use the rhyming dictionary to help you. You don't always need to rhyme. Haha, notice find and rhyme are not rhymes. You don't need to rhyme at all, actually. Remember the commercials, pictures of commercials I showed you? One of them was McDonald's. It's to all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. Let's go back to that one. To all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. Why is that in my head? There's no rhyme there. It's the rhythm that put that in my head. So I've seen teachers, including myself, make songs, chants and songs that don't have rhyme or don't always rhyme. What about the stress? You can see that's important to me. That is really important for your students to see the natural rhythm, not just hear it. Online dictionaries are good. Macmillan has a good one where the audio pronunciations show you the stress. They can help you mark the stress. And what about music? Maybe you like to make music. Maybe you have students in middle school or high school or older that want to make music for a rap that you create. But you don't need any of that. There are so many free instrumentals. Again, easier than writing a song to find a beat for a short rap. So if you looked at those ideas and you thought, okay, but I need an example, here we go. I have a rap about the solar system. I want to show you how I went about writing it, following what I just was talking about. So which words and phrases did I include in the solar system rap? They didn't come from nowhere. I didn't, just sit down and know what to put in the song. I looked at the unit. This was for a publishing company in Spain, names of the planets, revolution, and the verb revolve, rotation, rotate, right? So I may have thought of those things, but the point is you already as a teacher have all this content, right? You have what you're trying to teach. The problem is students often don't remember it. They haven't had enough exposure, enough meaningful repetition. Also, I looked at what grammar structures were focused on. You could see, like in a dialogue, a little bit of a mix between this and the other things, or a little, short explanation about the solar system with some of this grammar connecting with the vocabulary I just showed you. But that little dialogue is not going to stay in their head. That little short article about the solar system is not going to stay in their head. It's not that it's bad, right? It's great for introducing vocabulary and grammar to understand it, for you to help them understand it, but not for them to remember. That's where the song can come in. So, yes, no questions in the present with the short answers for affirmative and negative. Third person singular, switching to does, right? This is called that, right? It takes this long to do this, right? And then if you're thinking, how can I help my students get S's, put S's on when they need them and not put them on when they don't need them, this is the kind of thing that can happen, and sometimes only can happen through the repetition you get in a song, a game, or a short scene. So what did I do? I played around with the words I had and the grammar structures I had, and I came up with this. Are you ready? I'm going to do it a cappella. You can do it with me. Let's go. Come on, join me, Fluency MC. This is the sun is the star. Ready? Here we go. In our solar system, the sun is the star. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Those are the planets. And don't forget the moon. Do you live on Mars? No, I don't. Do you live on the sun? Of course not. Do you live on the moon? Are you serious? Do you live on planet Earth? Yes, I do. Can you imagine how one half of the class can do the question, one half of the class answers, or if people are in pairs or small groups, you could change the rules. A planet revolves around a star. That's why the 8 planets revolve around the sun. So there's revolves, revolve. This movement is called revolution. It takes 1 year, 365 days if the planet is closer to the sun. It takes less time. It takes more time if it's farther away. Does the sun revolve around the earth? Does the earth revolve around the sun? Now, games. I wonder how many of you know about this site. It's totally free. I've been using it for many months now without paying for it. I'm not here to advertise it. I'm not a affiliate marketer for Bamboozle or anybody else. So I'm recommending this simply because I like it so much, and it's because it's free. And without advertising, and you can use, students don't need accounts. Anyway, if you go to Bamboozle, you'll see the homepage here, then games. You can see where other teachers have made games, and you can find games and you can search all the way up through university. And then you can make your own games, which I've done here. These are just a few of them. And when you open one of these games, for example, the one about what's in the house, right? Things in a house. This is for my very, very little ones I have right now. It's just practice with remembering the word and also asking the question, what's this? You know, it's an. I just want to show you what it looks like when you play a game, and maybe you can see why it's so addictive. I'll show you this one we're just looking at, right? You make the game like this. If we can have 4 teams, right? And then you can ask the team to choose. They choose one. Oh, lose 25 points. Ah, what's this, right? And then that's for team 3. If team 3 answers correctly, they say, it's a blanket. Oh, they get the points. Now, to show you something very different, how about TOEIC, right? We can start a game. Let's say it's 3 teams, right? And then, right, team 1 is choosing number 8. You can have the other team read the question. It was a last minute, and team 1 says, it was a last minute cancel. No, it was a last minute cancellation. Oh. Anyway, you can create your own games, again, like with the song, based on the content that you are using, and the competition piece and the fun of the game and the power-ups, the lose points. There are a lot of wild cards in there. It's great, especially online now. You can do so much with games like that, and the students will want to do it again. They'll want to, and if they see the same question again and they remember it, they'll feel good, and that will stick in their heads. I want to tell you quickly a story that I often tell. Actually, that's not true. I tell a similar story about different people. And I don't think I've told this story recently, but there are many stories like this, and this has to do with games. My daughter is bilingual. She's in a public school program that, fortunately for us, has a English-French bilingual track. One of her classmates who's in the same program, her parents don't speak any English. She never did any activities in English with people, friends, or she didn't travel to other countries. My daughter is 13 years old, by the way. And she started this program when she was 11. This classmate started the program at the same time, 11 years old, with a high enough level of English to get into this program. She tested in as if she were a child from a bilingual family. Do you know how this girl, 11 years old, who had no English in her home life, in her social life, in her social life, let me get to that. How did this happen? It happened because this classmate of my daughter's became addicted, or let's go back to the word hooked, became hooked on a game online. The game was not something a teacher said you should use to learn English. And this is super important. As we say, we need to help get students hooked on meaningful practice outside of the classroom. That doesn't mean you should go and do this. That doesn't usually work, right? That's basic psychology. This girl had no interest in learning English at the time. She just wanted to play this game, and the game happened to be in English, kids in different countries playing against each other or with each other, sometimes against each other. And to do better in the game, she needed to chat with them and learn English. Now, do you think that chatting online with people in this game would be enough to get your English to a point where you could go to a bilingual program, even though you didn't grow up bilingual? No. What did she do? She started watching tutorial videos on YouTube. These 25-minute videos that helped her play the game. She still was not thinking, I'm trying to learn English. She's thinking, I love this game. I want to do better. I want to, buy a better house for my game. It was one of these like games, right? Where you have your own little world, right? I want to do better at this game to get more money on the game. So she watched these videos where they repeat in English all of the phrasal verbs, the verb tenses, all the different word forms, all the different types of grammar, structures, vocabulary, and pronunciation that she needed. And she would watch the same videos 5 times, 10 times. Why? Because she wanted to get the English in her head? No, because in order to understand what to do for her game, she needed to repeat these videos. After that, she started doing what? Listening to music in English, watching TV series in English, reading in English, and then getting accepted into a bilingual program at age 11. I have heard stories like this now again and again and again. This idea of somebody getting there, not by studying the language, right? But by getting the kind of exposure in a relaxed way with being motivated not by learning English, but by something else. In this case, a game. In other cases, songs, as we saw. And in the next example, short scenes. So in this, what I'm calling the trident of practice activities, we have songs, we have games, and we have short scenes. As I said earlier, a short scene could be from a TV series. They put the scene on YouTube. Just a short scene from that. It could be just a funny video that's going around in social media that's very short. It could be a short drama scene that you do in the classroom and students are practicing at home, repeating the scene. This is an example of a short skit. This would be for adults, right? This is a very funny video, in my opinion, and most students I show it to think it's really funny. And there are many reasons to use this video, and I'm not going to get into that. If you want to check out the video, check it out. The point is that it's only 2 minutes. It's full of English expressions that are really useful for your students to remember. Do we have a vehicle to get those expressions in the students' heads? Because just explaining, translating the idiom, or talking about the meaning of it, or even just seeing it written down and trying to study it, that's not going to work. What's going to work is the student wanting to watch this video 9 times, whether it's because of an activity you gave them to try to catch things or do certain things, or because, even better, they just want to watch it because it's so funny, and each time they watch it, it's easier to understand. Maybe they start with the subtitles, they start taking off the subtitles, you make a script to help them. Whatever it is, the fact that it's so short and it's packed with great functional language means that if they watch it enough times, they're going to keep it here. And then when they're in a situation, it could be a meeting or it could be another situation, that language is going to come out. Do you ever use Mr. Bean for activities? What's different about a Mr. Bean video from a video like this? The focus here is so much, at first at least, on listening and trying to catch vocabulary words, right? But this guy, right, almost never says anything, and other people don't say anything. How could you use Mr. Bean, however, to get grammar, vocabulary, and grammar structures in students' heads? Well, I'll show you something I do. It's certainly not original because Mr. Bean's used by a lot of people. So you might even say, oh yeah, I use Mr. Bean like this. And it doesn't have to be just Mr. Bean, but Mr. Bean, because he doesn't speak usually, it means you can do something very special with video. And silent videos, videos without any spoken language, you can use similarly. So I have materials I made for this particular episode of Mr. Bean. Now, if we played the video, we don't have time to play the video, but you can find it and check it out. If we played the video and asked these questions this quickly, maybe a student at a very high level would be okay. But a student at a high level would not necessarily need to hear these questions, see these questions, and respond to these questions. Look at the grammar here. Present continuous, WH questions. They're not all WH questions. They are on this page, but it continues. But you also need the vocabulary. So, what is he wearing? Well, the answer is he's wearing a swimming suit. But very likely that your students don't know that vocabulary word. So starting with just these questions would probably be too difficult. So how about something like this? What is Mr. Bean doing? Is he eating or is he driving? They could shout it out or they could circle it at first. Now it's not so difficult. So the idea here is it's supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be easy. And that's because we're going to try to get our students here eventually. So you could do it this way, a kind of, binomial multiple choice approach. You could also do this, or you could do this and then this, because again, the repetition, are they getting it right? You're going back, you're doing it again. In this case, they're not hearing the language again and again from the video. They're hearing it from you, right? And this is obviously hugely beneficial because if you want them and they need to hear WH questions, hear present continuous, you're not going to find a video activity that has that much repetition of it. So you can provide that. What is Mr. Bean doing? Is he eating or is he driving? He's driving. So now they don't see this. You could do it where they're just hearing you say this. And then you could go back here. Well, how hard are these questions now? They're not as hard as they were. You've given them this language. You can do this with other videos that don't have, obviously, if there's dialogue, it doesn't work as well. However, you can also turn down the volume and do it with anything. So often that's what I do. I make something like this where we start without the volume on, and it's a great way to get the vocabulary from the scene beforehand. So for example, just going back, if you teach adults a video like this, you could do it without the sound so they're not distracted by what they're saying, and it is fast English, right? And focus more on, making predictions, what they think is going to happen, etc. But even just the hand movements, what is he wearing? What do you think she's talking about? And then you can go back and look more at the actual video and the language and other things. So there are so many wonderful ideas out there for using short scenes. Facebook is one of the best places to find them. Specific things people post on Facebook or links off of Facebook, but especially now with so many of us, maybe most of us teaching online, what you can do with movie scenes when you're here, or television scenes or any scene with video, wow, it can be actually so much easier and better than it can in the physical classroom. And if you've got a big group online, an activity with a short scene can be really, really successful. So we talked about relax, repeat, remember. You can always remember that because it's down below here. That's my motto, my credo, and what American TESOL Institute described last week or 2 weeks ago when we started promoting this presentation as the trident of fluency. So I'm flattered by that. I appreciate that. But then I think there's a better trident of fluency, and I did not create this one. It's a colleague of mine, Chuck Sandy, who has graciously said, hey, you're the one publicizing this. I'm not talking about it. You can say it's yours, but it's not mine. But I've sort of made it my own. And it's very, very connected to relax, repeat, remember. And that is that when you practice meaning repetition, not using English in a conversation, not using English in a job interview, but the practice that we associate with practicing an instrument, practicing a sport, the repetition, the meaningful, motivating repetition. What happens? Your grammar, your vocabulary, your pronunciation, everything, even the receptive skills, can become more accurate. And how do you feel when people understand you better? How do you feel when you understand more of what you listen to? This is what builds confidence. It's not the fluency first that builds confidence, I don't think. I think it's the practice, right, that leads to the accuracy. The accuracy leads to making you feel more, I can do this. Accuracy does not mean perfect. It does not mean no mistakes. The mistakes are part of this, right? That's the practice building the accuracy. That's making mistakes like you make mistakes learning to play an instrument, learning a sport. You learn from the mistakes to get better. So accuracy is just getting better. And when you're better, you're more confident. When you're more confident, that's when you're more likely, right, to participate. That's when you're more likely to take a risk, to join a conversation. And that's when fluency can really bloom. Remember this? That's what I've tried to show you tonight, talking about, in particular, songs, games, and short scenes. And how, with that practice, once those grammar structures, once those collocations are up here, once they remember them, and they're acquired, not memorized, through these activities, then you can start to apply them and move to even more critical thinking, higher order thinking. And as I like to say, practice makes, did you say perfect? I'm not a big fan of practice makes perfect. I'll tell you why. If you say practice makes perfect and you mean what we were saying about practice and accuracy, like, keep practicing tennis and you'll get better. Practice makes perfect. Okay, that I agree with. But practice makes progress is often a better way to think about it, I feel, because so many people confuse perfect with not making mistakes. And we know the mistakes are hugely important. That brings us to the end of another American TESOL Institute webinar hosted by yours truly, Fluency MC, otherwise known as Jason Levine. I thank you so much for joining live. Thank you if you're watching the recording, and hope to see you next time. Thanks so much to ATI, American TESOL Institute, and Prep It Fluency. See ya. Have a great day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye.